So when I look at investing from a small business standpoint, ultimately, this starts with understanding what your intention is. Right? Do you want a lifestyle business? Do you want a small business? Do you want a small business that turns into a big business? What are you trying to do? Because based on that, then we can figure out where do you want to invest the time, money, and resources. And so that's kind of first intent would be, are you wanting a lifestyle business? Lifestyle business would be basically you have no employees and you're trying to get it to where you're working 10 or less hours a week, and that's enough to fund your lifestyle and you go about doing whatever you want. If it's a small business that is ultimately you're trying to turn into a big business, or and if maybe another way to define big business is a business that runs without you, that's a different infrastructure. So what happens a lot is small businesses inevitably, more often than not, if they don't go lifestyle and they don't become big business, the small business owner wears themselves the fuck out. Because running a small business, if you don't know how to grow it, is exhausting. There is a timeline, maybe everybody is different, but there is a timeline on how long you can do that because it takes an insane amount of energy to do it. And so in the early days, if you're looking for kind of investment advice, I think about it this way, like to me, when I talk about assets, investing in assets, one and two, number one assets you can invest in, number one is your brain, constantly upgrading, and your ability to learn quickly and iterate quickly will have a tremendous impact on the trajectory of your business. Where a lot of people get stuck in their personal life and in business is they don't learn very quickly. They don't make the adjustments quickly. It's like they're the fly hitting the window over and over and over again, and they keep making the same mistakes and they burn themselves out because they're not making the adjustment. So you want to iterate quickly and invest in your brain so that you're constantly getting better at your craft. One of the best ways to invest in your brain is to get in communities of people who are like-minded, share the same values, moving the same direction, and preferably at least a handful of them are notably ahead of you in the game. And that would be number one investment, is in you.
Would you invest in something you're lacking or your business is lacking first?
You. Yeah. Because your business is going to rise and fall based on you. It was one of the best pieces of advice I'd gotten very early. And obviously our business is it takes a lot of manpower in its current setup. And so that was in some ways frustrating for me because it's like, fuck, I have to trust all of these other people are going to execute, right? Or the thing doesn't work. And that was like and it just hit home like, hey, no, it ultimately comes down to my decisions. My decisions it would be inaccurate to say that it isn't based on your team, because it absolutely is, but it's your decision who's on your team. So you own that part of it. Once I got that, I was like, And that's still a struggle for me because my heart is always to be in service to others, and sometimes I make bets on performance, or I would say loyalty to an individual, not based on business, but based on relationship, and that still fucks me up. I still have to catch myself, and it's a trick because part of the reason, and I coach people not to do this, but part of the reason that happens is because at my core, I'm about empowering people and developing people, and so I default to that mechanism more often than not. Where that becomes painful, though, is if you are in a business that needs to perform, your growth is predicated upon the ability to get the right people in the right seats. And every time I talk to somebody who runs a big business, the number one thing they say is, I started hiring professionals. I stopped working with amateurs. And it's not that they stopped working with them altogether. And to be fair, some have said, and some amateurs turned into professionals, they grew. But it's like, you end up realizing you need a different grade of person. That's to take you to the next level. But it all starts with your own development. So to your question, it's like, well, you wouldn't even know those things if you weren't investing in yourself first. Right. And then you realize what you're good at, what you're not good at, and you want to get people in spots. Even if you are good at something, you'll get to a point where it doesn't make sense for you to do all those things. It's better for other people to do those things. So that going back to intent, if you're a small business trying to become a big business, you need to get great at building systems where the business runs without you. Otherwise, you're going to get trapped. So the investment in order, development of you, and then the second big investment is human capital, making sure ACE's in their places, you've got the right people on the bus, you're hiring the right people, bringing them in. And I think number one is you, number two is your people. And only number you because for the most part, you wouldn't even know to do the second part if you didn't upgrade yourself. So, and then education, right? Pay for, there's Vistage, which is I think old school, but that's, there's so many ways you can get in community with great people. But if you're gonna pay to get around people who are doing it. What I'm not saying, and with very few cases where I would think this is actually applicable, is to go in debt for a degree. There are exceptions to that, but to me, that is not the path. So it's like I've seen people do this, like go into debt to get an MBA. I'm like, dude, you don't need an MBA. Like, go hire people with MBAs if you think that's important. And I have, right? We've had a number of them come through here, and literally down to a person. I have yet to have one person come in here that didn't say, without me ever asking, I learned more working with you than I ever did getting my MBA. I'm like, well, that shouldn't be a surprise. And one of them went to Brown, which is, that's an Ivy League business school.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've said that too to people. I mean, I didn't get my MBA, I got my bachelor's in business, but the amount of times I've told people I've learned more here than ever in any textbook, class, professor, etc.
And it should make sense. Well, that's why I think the world education system is going to have to change, because as a whole, and there are exceptions, but I don't bank on exceptions, so I'll explain the general rules here. As a general rule, you're being taught theory with no practical application. So it doesn't stick. It's like, well, what do I do with this? Like, how do I apply this? And then it's not real time. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, it could be 2, 3, 5 years behind the real world. Right. You want to get into community with people who are winning at the level you want to win at and learn and extract everything you can from them. So that's what I look at investments. And then I like running this isn't always great for everybody, but I like the idea of running your own business. My original $16,000 stake, which is what I launched Fenix with, has turned into, I haven't done I was trying to figure out the total math, but it's probably worth $500 million in total revenue. Now, we didn't realize that as profit, but total revenue, specifically in LTV to our clients, that's a huge...
That's insane.
That's like Bitcoin-ish numbers. And I like that a lot better because you have way more control over your own business, right? Versus investing in other businesses, and meaning stock, which I'm not against investing in the stock market. I think there's lots of different ways to skin that cat, but I think running your own businesses is one of the better ways to invest your money. So the reason I bring that up is because not uncommon, I'll have clients or even some of our internal guys who are starting to stack cash, and they'll go, I got X amount of money, should I start putting this in the stock market? And I think there is a point where it's probably a good idea to diversify your asset classes and where you're putting your money. But I would, and I have for a very long time, is reinvested the money back into the business, right? That's a bigger, but I'm also playing the long game. I'm playing a much bigger game than most, but I think reinvesting back into your people, and one of the things that I'm getting really intentional about right now is reinvesting into tangible assets and infrastructure. So that's technology, systems, and people in a way that creates and holds value. So a lot of the early investment that I made in our business was really around culture and experience. Mm-hmm. And that isn't going anywhere. But now for me, it's technology is going to become a bigger part of that. Systems, curriculum, training, stuff that makes the company effective without me having to be in the middle of all of it. But keep investing back in. And I don't know when that stops. I guess when your rate of return begins to diminish or your exposure is too high. But I think investing back into your own businesses is the best place to go.
Yeah. As far as, and sorry to bring back into the conversation something that you had brought up earlier, but so the primary investment needs to be on you. But what if you don't know where to start? What if you ask yourself, well, I think I'm good, or I think I suck at this, this, and this, but where do you start?
Yeah, so you don't know where to start in starting a business, or don't know where to start
investing in yourself as far as.
So the easiest way to, this is a great question, and this a premise of most of my coaching, and it will be fundamental to a lot of the structures that I use. Any area of your life where you continue to get an unintended consequence, and really negative consequences are the ones that we would amplify here, but anywhere you continue to get an unintended consequence, it means you are unconsciously incompetent. Or you could be unconsciously competent in the case of a positive outcome. So maybe you're getting a positive outcome, but you don't know why you're getting it. Well, then we would say you're unconsciously competent, which means you're not aware. But for the most part, people don't usually complain about those things unless they're trying to replicate themselves, and then that becomes a problem. But when we look at the things where you're getting a negative unintended consequence, where do I continue to get a consequence I don't want? You lack awareness. And that was where I would start, right? So it's like, okay, I have a business that does $500,000 a year. Well, how much do you want it to do? $5 million a year. Well, why aren't you there? I don't know, right? And then that's where you begin. That's like, okay, well, what don't I know? What's the difference between a $500,000 business and a $5 million business? How do I 10x that? But it starts with recognizing what you don't know, what you're not understanding. Where is my lack of awareness in
But
that?
I feel like you could go so many different routes with that one.
And you will, potentially, especially early on, a lot of discovery is through subtraction. You just start removing things. It's not that, it's not that, it's not that. Now, you can greatly speed up this process by getting around people who are ahead of you in the game, because then they simply like, oh, no, it's this, right? In other words, like, it's one of these two things. Like, oh, thank God, right? And you'll go from this kind of, the phases of that, you'll go from like kind of a global optimism down to a very specific cynicism, right? As you begin to realize, oh, fuck, all right, this is what's holding me back. So the easiest way to get that exposure is to get around a coach or be in community of people who are doing the same thing that can help you, specifically those who have struggled with that, because they'll usually be able to go, oh, yeah, I remember when.
I feel like everyone that has gotten to that has struggled with.
Totally. Well,
So I feel like everybody would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though. If you could be unconsciously competent at something. So it could be there's something that you take as second nature. So let's just say you're a natural leader. We could debate whether there's such thing as a natural leader, but I do think there are people who are born with natural leadership skills. So there's things that you naturally do that you don't realize have a massive positive impact on your business, because that's just, I've always done that.
Right, and it's worked.
It's always worked. And so then when somebody comes along, you don't even know to tell them to do that, because you assume, isn't everybody doing that? Because you do it unconsciously. Right. So there's not even a thought. It doesn't come to your awareness that, oh, maybe there's something here that I need to unpack. And this is where, like, I really like people in positions that struggled at what they do now, because they generally are more empathetic and compassionate to people, and they're like, yep, I remember that phase. Yeah, and then it's like, oh, well, great, what the fuck did you do? And like, oh, okay, what did you do this? And you know that because they start asking questions that the only way they would know to ask you that question is if they had been there. And then you're like, yes, okay, we're getting somewhere. Now what do we do? But that's the awareness piece. And again, it starts with the fundamental principle. Where am I continually getting a negative result that I don't want? Yeah. Start there. And you could do this in your personal life too. It's like if there's something in your outcomes in your personal life that isn't what you want.
Finances, boyfriends,
girlfriends,
work,
diet, whatever,
yeah.
Right? It's like I can't ever seem to get enough sleep. I can't ever seem to lose that last 10 pounds or whatever the metric you're grading is. My relationships always seem to go this way. I always seem to get in these kinds of arguments, or I can never seem to get over this financial number. Well, there's a lack of awareness. It's like, well, what is this unintended negative consequence? Well, I do not intend to have a life cycle to my friendships and my relationships that ends this way. Like I had somebody we all know reach out to me and he's like, I'm in a pattern right now where I self-sabotage relationships when they get to a certain time period.
You said friendships? Or?
In this case, it was intimate relationships.
Okay.
So I said, well, when was the first time you felt that way? When did this happen? And he was like, well, at least 10 years ago. Like, okay, well, what was going on? And he goes through the whole thing. He's like, child, baby mama, pain, made a bunch of bad decisions. He made an unconscious choice at that point to believe that he was no longer worthy of love, no longer worthy of having a healthy, stable relationship. And I've seen lots of people do this. So as soon as it hits a certain pattern or certain...
The video that was posted of, I don't feel for them a certain way.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
But, well, that's the, if you're unconsciously going through the pattern of relationship without dealing with underlying issues, that's what happens. But in this case, what he recognized is, oh, I really love this person. And that triggered fear. What if they won't love me back? Or I don't deserve to be loved back because of X, Y, and Z, right? Which is integration and forgiveness, letting go of the bullshit you have on the inside that makes you think you're not worthy of these things. And so those underlying stories get in play. And so when he gets to a certain level, he just blows the relationship up. Because instead of them leaving him, which is his fear, right? They're not going to be there for me. Well, it's easier if I just blow the relationship somehow. Which is like, fuck. But I see people do this in every area of their life, including business, right? Where they'll get their business to a certain level, and then once the business gets to a certain level, they're comfortable, and they'll fuck up the business and go back into struggle because they don't know what it's like to not struggle. To not struggle is weird, which is
also a motivator for them, seems like. Got it?
Yeah.
That's kind of the point, is that, and the difference between sustained success and moments of success very often is intention. So for instance, it isn't uncommon for people to want to get in good shape because they want to mate, right? Something in the mating protocol, which could be as little as I just want to look good because I want somebody to fuck me, or it could be I'm looking for a lifelong partner. It's anywhere in that spectrum. But the driver isn't I want to be physically fit. It's not I want to look good in the mirror naked for myself. This is a means to another end. So whatever that end is, as soon as that end is satisfied, to whatever degree it's satisfied, it diminishes the drive to complete whatever it is we were doing. Right? Well, it's the same with success. For a lot of people, and I'll pick on dudes here because this is pervasive with dudes, they believe their value is tied to their ability to provide. Right, or to succeed by a world's definitions of success. But for many of them, the reason for doing it isn't because they're particularly passionate about business or particularly passionate about making money. They're doing it because they believe their worth is tied to those things. So what ends up happening is if they get the right or wrong woman in their life, and suddenly their identity gets tied to them, they'll blow up their business, they'll blow up their finances trying to make that person happy and make that person their world. You especially see this in early life, like the 18 to 25, maybe up to 30 these days. Although more and more guys are starting to not do this, and there's a big pushback on that. Right? Have you seen also really fascinating, this is a thing, what's it called? Joseph, help me with this. Passport.
Is this a term?
Yeah.
Oh, I've not
Passport wives, It's basically more and more guys in America are going overseas to find wives from
Useful
other
wives.
countries.
Yeah.
Useful, yeah. And
100%.
there's massive pushback, like, what the fuck? And it's like, well, can't you understand what's happening in our society right now? Why they're doing this? And so now there's whole TikTok, it's not passport wives, but it's in that genre. It's passport bros. Passport bros, which is to imply they're going overseas. So I don't know if he's going to watch this. I'll just, very, very general. Guy I know, he's very successful relative to his age and his income. And I say this objectively. He's like a 2 out of 10 physically. Like it's horrible. I feel bad for him. right? It's like, fuck. Is dating this really beautiful Ukrainian girl. And I'm like, you know, it's just when you're like, what doesn't make sense here? And then he explains it to me. Right? And she's like, she's totally, according to him, totally loyal to him, totally pumped on him, just wants to take care of him. Just like, and I've never seen him happier. He's just like in his own little world. And I'm like, I get it, because she has a different set of values, right? Security and comfort are what she wants. And for most of the world, that is what most women want. It just happens to be in our woke-ass country right now where we're trying to pretend that's not what they want. And it's like the joke's on them because they are going to get left behind. Nobody's going to want to fucking mate with them. And that's exactly what's happening. It's like, I don't want to fucking date somebody like that. I don't want to, right? So it's like, anyway, I thought it was a joke. And then I looked it up. It's like, no, this is a real fucking thing. Passport Bros, I think that is the name. Can you look that up, make sure I'm right on that? But what was interesting, and I was going somewhere with this, so now then there's this pushback like, oh yeah, you just want to date uneducated girls who don't know what it's like to be a woman. So now there are these groups of women saying, motherfucker, we're more educated than you are, right? We come from a different kind of culture with a different set of values, but don't diminish us. You're literally, the one video I was watching, she was like, you were literally doing the very thing you're judging these guys for doing, judging us as uneducated and incapable. Like, you are the problem. And I was like, fuck.
Because no offense, but there are guys out there that do not give a shit about working, making money,
so
providing.
That's another big concern. So it's like, you got to look at both sides of this and why is this happening? But for the first time since World War II, per worker productivity is dropping, and it continues to drop. This is predictably a bad trend. So the U.S. debt, our debt ceiling, which we just raised again, and we'll vote on this in another 2 years and pass the buck on to somebody else, which will still be us. We just raised our debt ceiling again. Since World War II, our debt has always been lower than our GDP, right? So you could think of your GDP as your max credit limit, right? If you had a credit card, your GDP is your max credit limit. Because the US dollar has been, US dollar has been the world currency for this last cycle, which is 70, 80 years since World War II, and the whole world runs on US dollars, we've enjoyed very lax credit restrictions, which allows us to just print money. And Nixon in the 1970s took us off the gold standard and just started printing money. And you thought, when that happened, I had friends that were alive during that time period, they said they were certain the market was going to tank, right? It was like, we went off the gold standard, which means our dollars weren't tied to gold. Which is why I laugh when people are like, crypto, what's crypto? It's just an idea, right? I'm like, well, what the fuck do you think money is? It is just an idea. That dollar that we hold has zero value to it. There is no tangible asset other than the great American people. That note is a promissory note against the US government that this will be honored, and it's being honored based on the GDP of the country. Okay, so to give you some frame. This is, to your point, there's two pains to this. One is overall productivity per worker has gone down since the pandemic, which no surprise there for a number of reasons. But specifically men are more likely to opt out of higher education, whatever that looks like, and more of them are still living with their parents. It's like failure to launch. They're over it. So they're not working, they're not taking care of themselves, they're not motivated income-wise. And so you're right. So it's like, fuck, if I'm and this is horrible to say, but if you're looking for, and if you go interview, and there's been a bunch of studies done on this, and then like spoofs made of it, we go interview a woman and say, who are you looking for? Who's your perfect guy? 6'1" is the most common height, right? Makes $250,000 to $400,000 a year. Looks are important, but like they're not like all the way up there, but they're pretty high. And I think there was one more stat that I'm forgetting, and then it's like if you do the math on that, you're literally talking about 0.01% of the male population. And there are literally hundreds of thousands of women looking for that. So it's like the disparity is like, and it's like, this is animal behavior, right? That's why like one elk will have a harem of 50 fucking other, what are they called? Female elks are called? Cows? I think they're called cows. No, in elks I think it's cows, but I could be wrong. Whatever. But it's like you look throughout the animal kingdom, this is it. This is also why it's like, I get it from your point. It's like, that's a problem because if you're a woman and that's what you're looking for, the chances of finding what you're looking for are incredibly slim.
They are cows.
They are cows, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I thought they were. And then on the flip side, so as a whole, although jury's out on Gen Z, so this may flip on its head, but we'll just say safely for most of human history up until maybe the last 10 years, and we'll see where this goes, men don't give a shit how much a woman makes, doesn't give a shit about their income, their career, unless it impedes on the relationship. And they don't give a shit about any of those things. What do they care about?
Taking care of the man, the house, and the children.
Nurturer, who's hopefully decent at sex and beautiful enough to get me hard.
Drop the mic.
So it's like, fuck, right? That's for most men, that's not an incredibly high standard. Well, I mean, I think it's a beautiful standard, one in America that unbelievably is getting harder and harder to meet, which is why Passport Bros. Look it up.
I need to look this up.
I couldn't believe it.
Did you meet any passport bros in Greece?
I think Passport Bros have become the evolution of the mail order bride.
Right.
But instead of bringing them here, they're going there to that country. Yeah.